Today we celebrate Epiphany. And as you know, the word Epiphany means to make known or to be known, or, light bulb. You have an epiphany, like in the cartoons. And it's called the Epiphany because it's the visit of the Magi, who were Gentiles, of course. There are two sets of visitors who come to visit Jesus at the Nativity. The first, of course, are the shepherds, and we assume that they're Jewish, part of the Jewish community. But the second, in Matthew, the second group of visitors are these interesting Oriental folk who come to pay homage to the new king of the Jews. And they are Gentiles. So if we were actually in the Greek and Russian Orthodox churches, they don't celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December like we do. Epiphany is their big celebration. They celebrate Christmas and Epiphany and the baptism of Jesus all in one go. It's a lot to take in. We kind of, in the West, we're a little bit more simple, and we like to sort of spread it out a little bit. But today is the feast of the Epiphany. Jesus made known. Jesus made known. Interesting that there's so much in this gospel, it's difficult to quite know where to start. It's full of allegory and hidden messages. If, like the wise men, you are looking for the rising of the star, you're looking for it. Interesting that the Magi came from the east. These were people who were astrologers, so they spent their nights looking at the stars and predicting the future. From that, they were also interpreters of dreams. Interesting that they were warned in a dream at the end of the story not to return to Herod. I wonder why. They didn't didn't believe Herod when he said, "Oh, go and search diligently for the child so that I can come and pay him homage too." We know what kind of homage that Herod wanted to pay. Herod, of course, Herod the Great, known for the murder of a number of his family members who either displeased him or he felt were a threat to his rule. You might have seen the film from the 80s, the Jesus of Nazareth, Franco Zeffirelli film. And Peter Ustinov, bless him, he's gone now, but Peter Ustinov played King Herod. And I remember the scene after the wise men had left Herod's shouting on the top of the battlements in a rage and in fear, saying, "There is only one king in Judea." And of course he was the only king in Judea. Of course, the other thing about Herod is that he wasn't really Jewish. He was Hasmonean, and so he and his sons who succeeded him in ruling Judea and Palestine, the only real claim to the throne that they had was that they were friends of the emperor. Herod the Great just happened to be pals with Octavian, and when Octavian became the emperor Augustus, Herod said, "Oh, that little country in the east, Palestine, I'd really like to be king someday." And Augustus probably said something like, "As long as they pay their taxes and there's no trouble, you can do whatever you like there." And he did. One of the reasons why King Herod built the second temple was to legitimize his reign, because everybody knew he wasn't really part of them. The other thing about the story is interesting is that only the wise men seem to have known what was going on, these foreigners. Because presumably, when the wise men came to Jerusalem and told them the news about the birth of Jesus, this new king, it took Herod and everybody by surprise. They were all frightened, terrified. They had no clue. And everybody else, seemingly in Palestine, was going about their daily business and living their lives. It was only the wise men, because they had been looking for it. They had been looking for the star, and then they had followed the star. And that's true today, isn't it? God doesn't force God's self upon us. If you want to go and live your life and not worry about spiritual things, God isn't going to punish you. There isn't going to be a bolt of lightning hit your house. You have that choice. And you tend only to see God's hand at work in things when you're looking, or when you're trying to look, when you're wanting to see those little small miracles that happen every day, or the beauty of nature, or the real gift of friendship, and you feel that unexpected joy. It tends to be when you're looking, like a wise man. And then the gifts, of course, the gifts. And I often think what Mary must have thought. When I usually teach this to kids, they're usually kind of underwhelmed by the gifts. Well, not so much the gold, because they get that, because then you can take the gold and you can buy toys. But frankincense and myrrh, what's a baby, what's a child going to do with frankincense and myrrh? Well, I guess you could sell them. They were costly gifts. But they were gifts that foretold the future, weren't they? Gold for a king, of course. Frankincense for a god, for the deity. And myrrh foreshadowing his passion and death, the cross and his death. And I wonder what Mary must have thought. What did she think? Pondered all these things in her heart, probably. And Herod, calling for the wise men secretly. I wonder why he did that. Why did he call them in secretly? Because he was more interested in his power and his position, and he didn't want anybody to be rocking the boat. So he knew the Magi had useful information, and he wanted to know the exact time so that then he could go back to his astrologers and really pin down who Jesus was, what the threat was, and how he could deal with that threat. And the murder of the innocents, of course, is the outcome. But here's the thing, and you can spend more time reading this over with a commentary because there are lots of other threads in this story. But here's the thing, is this whole story, I think, points to an important thing about God and about Christianity, and that is, there are no outsiders, there are no foreigners, there's nobody outside the circle of trust. My family and I watched the Meet the Parents this last weekend with Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro, and it's a very funny film. If you haven't seen it, it's kind of an old film, but the father-in-law, played by Robert De Niro, has this thing about the circle of trust. And his family, his family is the circle of trust, and you have to kind of, obey the rules to be in the circle of trust. Well, the whole point is everybody is in the circle of trust. Everybody is in the circle of God's trust. As Paul said in the Ephesians, in his letter to the Ephesians, this is the mystery, that everybody is included, even the Gentiles, even those who are considered untouchable or unapproachable. And this is why Matthew, writing to Jewish Christians, has the very first visitors at the stable, at the manger throne, be Gentiles, be foreigners. And so what's the message for us? Well, this new coming year, what are we going to do? We often think, don't we, of the new year bringing in new promise and a new start, a fresh start. I think that's what New Year's resolutions are all about. It's going to be different this year somehow. We're not going to make the same mistakes. We're going to do it differently. We're going to learn. It's going to be better. But then we often find week 2, week 3, we look around and all the garbage that we were carrying around from the previous year has somehow followed us. and our New Year's resolutions haven't quite worked out as we thought. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because New Year's resolutions tend to be very egocentric, tend to be all about me. I want to lose weight. I want to do better with my finances. I want to exercise more. I want to quit smoking. I want to drink less. Whatever it might be. It's all really about me. Maybe our New Year's resolution might be about what the gospel is about, what Paul was about, what Jesus was about, what the whole message of God's kingdom is about, which is loving and accepting and inviting those who feel excluded into the circle of trust because they are already in. And we will be bombarded this year, as we were bombarded last year, with all sorts of messages about building walls and excluding others and being careful and suspicious of foreigners and immigrants or people who are different than us, or how we need to know who's in really and who's out so that we can stay safe. Let's not do that this year, you and I, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, as those following by faith the star. Could that be our New Year's resolution this year? Could it? Do we have the courage? Because it's going to take courage. It will take courage to swim against the stream, or more like a tidal wave, as it feels sometimes. Can we, like the Magi, not be put off course, continue to follow that star? Well, let's see. Let's see.